Hey guys, welcome to our channel Zytologist, where we talk about all things science involved in beer and brewing. My name is Shiv, and this is the first video in the series of videos on ingredients such as hops, yeast, grains, and water, so that you can get a better understanding about the ingredients and help you make better recipes at home. In today's video, we'll talk about everything involved in grains, such as what is the purpose of grains in making a recipe, how to convert grains to malts, how to analyze grains and its technical specifications, how to analyze grains using sensory analysis and a cold steeping method, and finally, how to choose the right grains for your beer recipe. And I'll show you how I use all this knowledge in today's brew day, which is making this Pastry Imperial Stout. So stay tuned. Grains are one of the most important ingredients in a beer recipe, forming the backbone of every beer you brew. So why are grains so important, you may ask? Well, first of all, grains contribute the most important thing that we need in brewing, which is our sugar source. Now that sugar is converted into ethanol using yeast. But in addition to the sugars, the grains also contribute a bunch of nutrients for our yeast in the form of free amino nitrogen, or a pool of amino acids. In addition to the amino acids, the grains also contribute protein that we need in the beer, which contributes to the mouthfeel of the beer. That is how thin, how full, or how gloopy a beer feels in your mouth. Now, in addition to all of that, grains also contribute so many flavor compounds to the beer, ranging from biscuit, toffee, chocolate, coffee, smoke, all the way to roast and even black tar in some cases. The same grain can be converted into multiple kinds of malts depending on the processes that are used, such as different temperatures and different times. So let's talk about that. Before grains can be used for brewing, they need to be converted to malts. This is done through the process called malting. Most brewers buy their grains pre-malted, but this can also be done at home. Malting contains of two major steps. The first one is called germination. In germination, the grains are soaked in a small amount of water for a couple of days. In this time, the grains start to sprout. Due to sprouting, the grains lead to development of enzymes such as alpha amylase and beta amylase. These enzymes will be helpful during the mash to convert our starch into the sugar. During germination, the protein also breaks down. This leads to breaking down of the cell walls, which provides an easier access to the sugar source. Germination is followed by kilning. In kilning, the pre-germinated grains are heated at a specific temperature for a certain amount of time. The heat added arrests germination, or stops the enzymes from developing further. This also adds caramelization to the malt, which gives it more flavor. Along with caramelization, we are also adding a bit of bitterness to the malt depending on the degree of kilnness. Depending on the balance between germination and kilning, we can obtain different malts from the same grain. A highly germinated and lightly kilned grain would give us our base malts. These have high enzymes but very little flavor. A 50-50 balance between germination and kilning would give us our Munich, Crystal, and other lightly kilned malts. These malts have flavor as well as enzymes. Malts which have very little germination and really high kilning are really rich in flavor but have next to no enzymes and need to be used sparingly. Due to the low kilning of the base malts, they usually have high amounts of moisture. For this reason, the grain crush needs to be finer to break the base malt into uniform small particles. On the other hand, for our specialty malts, they have seen a high amount of kilning and are already quite low in moisture. As a result, they are quite brittle and need a more coarser crush as compared to our base malts. For today's recipe, I'm using 6 different specialty malts. I am brewing a big Imperial Pastry Stout, which has more than 10% alcohol by volume. This means that the recipe uses a lot of grains. I use this simple trick to keep my mashing efficiency high. During dough-in, I first add my base malt. My base malt has high amount of grain husk. This ensures that there are channels created in the grain bed, which leads to easy filtration. Then I would add my other adjuncts such as oats, wheat, or rye. Then I would mix my base malt to ensure that it is completely incorporated with water. This ensures that there are no dough balls left behind. Then turn on the pump till you obtain an optimum amount of flow. I find that if I skip this step, I usually end up with a stuck mash. After this, I would add my specialty grains. But instead of mixing the specialty grains completely with my base malt, I would layer the grains on top. This is because our specialty grains have a finer particle size. If I completely mix the specialty grains with our base malt, it would clog the channels that are formed in the grain bed and lead to poor filtration. Just gently mix the top layer of the specialty grains to ensure that all the grains are covered with water and we have no dough balls. Then turn on the pump and wait for the color of the liquid to change. As you can see, even with a huge amount of grains in this recipe, I still get a pretty good flow and a pretty efficient mash. My efficiency for this recipe was up to 82%. Now, while we wait for the mash to complete, let's have a look at all the steps involved in choosing the right grains for your recipe. As we are all about science here, let's give the grains the zytologist approach and look at the technical specifications to learn a bit more about them. Each malt house or malt manufacturer usually have their own set of product guides or technical specification sheets, which are available online through their website or at your local home brewing store. I find technical specification sheets to be quite helpful in order to get better understanding of a new product that came to the market that I've never used before, or to improve understanding of an existing product that I've been using for a while but want to find out new ways or better ways to incorporate it in my recipe. This is a product guide from a local malt house here in Australia from New South Wales called Voyager Craft Malt. Upon opening a technical specification sheet, you'll be greeted by a table like this one on the left side of the screen. The table has different parameters and the values of those parameters. Let's go through each parameter to understand what it stands for. The first one is extract. Extract indicates the amount of starches, sugars, both fermentable and unfermentable, that you will extract from the grains. In this case, it is 81%, which is fairly high. Color of this grain is quite light. As you can see, it's about 2 to 4 EBCs. Usually, color is a good indication, as you can tell how much kilning the grains have seen. The higher the kilning, the darker will be the color. As we discussed earlier in this video, lower kilning means a higher diastatic power or a higher enzymatic activity, but lower flavor. So this indicates that this malt will usually make a good base malt. Next one is apparent attenuation. Apparent attenuation is different from extract in the sense that apparent attenuation expresses the amount of starch that will be converted into fermentable sugars. And extract indicates the amount of starch that will be converted into fermentable as well as unfermentable sugars. So in this case, since the apparent attenuation is 81%, which is exactly the same as our extract, which is also 81%, it means that all of our starch, or at least most of our starch, will be converted to fermentable sugars, and the beer will end up quite dry. The next one is friability. Friability is the tendency of a solid substance to break down into smaller particles. In other words, friability gives us an indication of the moisture level of the grains. The higher the friability, the lower is the moisture level. In this case, the friability is 75%, which is not too high, but also not too low. Saccharification. Saccharification is the amount of time that it takes for all of that starch to be converted into our fermentable sugars by enzymes. For this malt, we only need 5 to 15 minutes to convert all of that starch into sugar. The next one is FAN. FAN stands for free amino nitrogen and acts as nutrients for our yeast during fermentation. An FAN level of 100 and plus is usually considered to be quite helpful for the yeast. Anything lower than that, you might have to supplement with additional nutrients. The next one is diastatic power. The diastatic power expresses the enzymatic activity of the grains. Enzymatic activity means the amount of alpha amylase and beta amylase that are present in the grains to convert all of that starch into sugar. As you can see, since this grain is quite lightly kilned, as it is indicated by the lower color, we can see the diastatic power is quite high, which is greater than 250. This means that we do not need to supplement any additional enzymes, and these grains can convert all the starch into sugar by themselves. Last but not the least is the amount of protein. Protein is quite helpful in the beer as it helps with the mouthfeel of the beer, the body of the beer, as well as the head retention. So in this case, the protein content is 8 to 11%, which is not too low, but not too high. If you want higher protein in your beer, you have to go for different grains such as wheat, oats, and other high dextrinous malts. So what I learned from this malt specification table is that this malt will make a great base malt for my recipes. That is because this malt has light flavor profile, it has a high diastatic power, and it also has a high apparent attenuation, which will give me a crisp and clean finish. Comparing that to a Munich malt or a crystal malt, we can clearly see the difference after looking at the malt specifications. As you can see, the extract is lower in this case, which is 78. The color is higher, which indicates that it has seen more kilning than our base malt, which means it will have low enzymes but have more flavor in the malt. The apparent attenuation drops down to 76%. This means that there will be some unfermentable sugars in this malt, and it will not give me a crisp or a dry finish. The saccharification time for this malt is also higher, between 40 to 60 minutes. And you can see that the diastatic power reduces to just above 50, which means I need to supplement this with some additional enzymes if I'm using it as my base malt. So what I learned from this table is that Munich malt can, although be used as a base malt, I would most likely need to supplement it with another malt which can supply more diastatic power. It is a balancing game when making a recipe. Back to the brew day, and the mashing is complete. Let the wort lauter for a couple of minutes. Then slightly break the grain bed on the top. This will reconfigure the channels. Now sparge as per normal. This will also help in getting a higher efficiency during the mash. In today's recipe, I'll be further using some extra sugars to bump up the original gravity. In today's recipe, I'm using brown sugar, dark brown sugar, and lactose. I usually like to add my sugars during ramp up to boil. This prevents any scorching at the bottom of the vessel. Ensure that you mix straight after adding the sugars. Now we've reached a boil, and it's time to add our first and only hop addition for the day. Since this is an Imperial Stout recipe, it does not have a complex hop profile, and it is all about the malts, so I'm just using Magnum for bittering at 60 minutes. So all that's well and good, but now let's look at the sensory analysis of our grains, and the best way to do that is the cold steeping method. Cold steeping is a great method to understand the flavor profile of malts. In order to cold steep malts, simply crush a small amount of malts and put it in a container. Add about twice the amount of water and let it soak in the fridge overnight or for a couple of days. Cold steeping malts does not extract any tannins from the malt profile, bringing all the flavor components to the forefront and helping eliminate all the noise. In today's recipe, I'm using 8 specialty malts. They are Munich malt, Voodoo malt, brown malt, Cara Hell, Cara Aroma, roast barley, chocolate malt, and Cara Red. So now I'm going to extract all the liquid from my cold steeping using this muslin bag, and then transfer all of that liquid into individual falcon tubes such as this one, so we can analyze the color, and then we'll analyze the taste as well as the aroma of each of the malts as well. This method allows you to inspect each of the grains individually and provides a good idea of how each grain will impact the flavor of the final beer. I like to start off by looking at the color of the liquid and see in what quantity I can use it in my final beer to get the desired color that I need. Then I take in the aroma, picking up any subtle notes that I might not pick up otherwise. Followed by the aroma, I always take a little taste of the liquid. The taste might not be super accurate as you would extract a bit more bitterness and caramelization in your beer recipe as the malts would be heated, but it still gives you a pretty good idea of all the subtle flavor notes that you will obtain in your beer. In today's recipe, I aim to extract flavors such as graham cracker, biscuit, chocolate, coffee, and dark caramel. However, the chocolate that I will get from the grains is not enough, therefore I'm supplementing it with some additional cacao nibs. The cacao nibs will go into the kettle 5 minutes before flame out. This helps to extract all the good chocolate flavor without extracting any harsh tannins which might make the beer astringent. Once the boil is complete, it's time to cool the wort. If you do not have an oxygen cylinder, ensure you allow the wort to fall from a height to ensure maximum oxygen can be incorporated into the wort before pitching the yeast. And it is finally time to taste our Pastry Imperial Stout that we brewed in this video. But before we get on to the tasting, I would like to share something really exciting with you guys. Now it's been a couple of weeks or a month or so since I shot the footage of the brew day and between today when I actually get to taste the beer. And that is because we guys have been busy working in the background on something really exciting, which I'm excited to share with you now. So it brings me great joy to share with you guys that the Zythologist is finally officially a commercial brewing company. But we're more than just a brewery. We partnered up with Monash University to have our lab facilities, which we will use to provide analytical services and consulting services to other breweries to help them improve their beers and make consistent beers every time. We also have a strong education pillar where we help Monash University to incorporate brewing as a part of coursework and teach university students about brewing sciences. Now this YouTube channel will become a part of the education pillar and will focus on home brewers, bringing the tips and tricks of commercial brewing to home brewing scale. Now we also produce our own limited range of beers to showcase our expertise and our scientific knowledge to help brewers, whether in breweries or at home, to make better beer. And we are entering the market with our first beer, which is none other than the Pastry Imperial Stout that we brewed in this video. So Gravity is a Pastry Imperial Stout brewed using the exact same recipe that I use in this video. But since we're releasing this beer commercially, we added something a little extra. We used a single malt red gum whiskey from Malting Distilling to add some barrel-aged complexity to this already quite complex beer. So without further ado, let's get into the glass. As you can see, the beer is pitch black in color and quite dense in flavor. Straight up you get notes of chocolate, coffee, biscuit, hints of coconut and vanilla, and then that whiskey note comes through. As you can see, when I rock the glass back and forth, you can see the thickness of this beer. It's a rich, decadent brew. In the flavor, all the notes that we got in the aroma follow through quite nicely. First up, you get a lot of chocolate. Then you get some coffee, followed by some biscuit notes. Then it perfectly runs up with some vanilla and toasted coconut. And then you get that warmth in the end from that whiskey aging. As it warms up, I'm getting more notes such as dark caramel, muscovado sugar, and almost like a molasses taste. Overall, I think it's quite a complex and enjoyable beer, almost dangerously so at a 10% ABV. If you want to brew this beer, you can follow the recipe in the link below, or if you're in Australia, you can also get this recipe shipped to you from Keg King, based in Melbourne, and the recipe kit includes all the grains and hops and all the adjuncts that you would need to make this beer at home. If you like, you can also buy this beer from our website, which is www.thezytologist.com, and we ship as little as a 4-pack all over Australia. If you learned something from this video and would like to see more of them, make sure to like, comment and subscribe. It really helps us keep going and make more videos for you guys. Check us out on our Instagram called @thezytologist, where we share interesting facts about beer and also do stay up to date with our new releases. I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, cheers.